the positioning is so critical. Like,
Mhm.
it's so critical. We're gonna die if it's bad. Because if the positioning's bad, we don't get on the short list. If the positioning's bad, we don't make it fast past the first call. Like, we're dead in the water.
Hey, welcome to the Rare Mind Podcast, a new thing where I, Alex M.H. Smith, the author of No Bullshit Strategy, explore the outlier behaviors that produce outlier results. I mean, look, in this world that we're living in where every idiot is getting ChatGPT to tell them what to do, this is the stuff that matters more than ever. And today we're speaking to the world authority on one of the most important parts of business craft, the positioning guru April Dunford. I hope you enjoy. So I'm joined today by someone who, well, I don't think you would you argue with me if I described you as maybe the world authority on positioning? As far in my book, you are anyway.
Oh, that's nice. I'd probably put a heap of qualifiers on that. I would say if it's B2B and it's tech, that's and it's, B2B tech with a sales team, yeah, I take that.
Yeah, put a few commas in there. Put a few commas in there when we get over the hump. She's also the author of an amazing book, two great books. I must say I've only read one of them, that being Obviously Awesome, which is like the classic tome on positioning. And also particularly impressive to me is definitely one of the world's, just in any field, heavyweight solo consultants. I know what the game is like. I know that it can be a difficult game to play. And if anyone's mastered it, it is April Dunford. Thank you very much for joining me here today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, obviously, this being what with my audience and brand and everything, this podcast is broadly speaking about strategy.
Yeah.
And I think that the obvious place to start is with, let's just get the sort of definition on terms out of the way and just unravel the relationship between business strategy writ large and positioning. How do you see these two things connecting? I think in a lot of people's just colloquial way of talking, they often become almost one and the same thing. So how do you
Yeah.
delineate between them?
Yeah, we have a terrible habit over on the marketing side of just defining things to mean whatever we want them to mean in the moment. And so, positioning gets defined lots of different ways. And in the work I do, we always have to start with a level set on what do we mean by positioning. So people will most often confuse positioning with messaging. So they'll say, "Oh,
Yeah.
we're doing positioning. We're talking about the words that go on the homepage, right?" And I'll say, not really." In my mind, positioning defines how your offering or set of offerings is the best in the world at delivering something, some value that a well-defined set of customers cares a lot about. It's kind of the answer to the question, why pick us over the other things you could choose to do to solve this problem? Now, in my mind, that is particularly in tech companies, our positioning isn't a static thing. It actually changes over time. And often we have a vision of where we want this thing to go. And that vision looks really different from what the product is right now. So we might say, oh, we're selling to just banks right now, but the vision is to sell to all kinds of companies way beyond banking and everything else. But right now we have a product that really only satisfies banks. So that's what we're doing right now. We would position that thing as banking. And then we would have this vision that says, oh, well, it's everything. It's, our goal is to sell to every big company in the land. I worked for a company that was exactly like this. We had this little thing and we were selling it to investment banks. That's the only place where we could win. We were very focused on that. Our positioning at the time was we are CRM for investment banks. That's it. Now we had a vision that was we were going to be CRM for large enterprises. We didn't care who. And then we had a strategy. And the strategy, at least in my definition of it, the strategy was the series of steps that we were planning to take to get from A to B. So if A is where we're at right now, which is just serving banks, and B is the big vision of serving anybody as long as you're big, there were a set of steps. And we were really into Jeffrey Moore at the time. And so we were really into bowling pin strategy. And so the idea was we're going to knock over the lead pin, which was investment banking. But once we got investment banking, that would enable us to go into other divisions inside the investment bank. And so we would get into private client services and research. And then once we had that, that would enable us to stretch into retail banking. And by the way, it would take us a couple of years to do that. So we'd be building out all the things in the product that would allow us to stretch into retail banking. And so once we could stretch into retail banking, then we would shift the positioning at that point. We wouldn't just be CRM for investment banks. We would be CRM for banking. You know, and then the plan was while we were out selling to retail banks and investment banks, we would be building out a thing that would allow us to stretch into insurance. Insurance is a very big market, but a specialized set of things. We need to build something for claims and life insurance and all these different things that we didn't have. So we'd be building that. And the strategy was, well, we're going to build that. And then once we build that, then we'd be able to say we are CRM for financial services. And then if we got that, that makes us a huge company at that point because the totality of financial services is really, really big. And after that, we may be able to actually stake a claim, take on the leader in the market and say, you know what, we're CRM for large enterprises. We don't care what kind of enterprise you are, and this is what we do.
That's very good, and I'm very glad that it does. Although the language and the way that you've come at it is completely different, it does align with my assumptions on it. The one thing that I've always thought when people colloquially talk about positioning, it's funny how you talked about the messaging and where it kind of differs from some of the strategy work is that to me, what most people they generally think of positioning as the last thing they do, as in we build the business, the whole thing is now this baked set product and everything's there. And now you basically say to some positioning person, you say, right, tell me how we can position this thing. But by that point, it's sort of like the horse has already bolted because you're constrained by the realities of that thing. And you might look at it and say, well, listen, there's a limit to how much you can sell this because the way it's been built, it wasn't built with a particular positioning in mind. It wasn't built with one of those future steps in mind.
Well, the
So
value is the value you could deliver is the value that you could deliver. That's it at that point, right? And so
exactly,
you might say, well, we wish we could deliver this other value. Well, that's great. You're going to have to build that.
you're gonna
But
have to build that.
it kind of is what it is, right? We don't get to just make this stuff up. Like the product does what it does. It delivers the value that it delivers.
So when you're working with your clients in the B2B tech space, typically on a project, are you doing the best possible job you can of essentially positioning what exists and kind of trying to, you know, polish the turd, so to speak, as much as possible? Or do you also, in these engagements,
Hmm.
have the mandate to change things about the product in order to unlock a superior positioning?
Yeah. So in the consulting work that I do, well, let's back it up for a second. Like this idea that the positioning is the last thing you do is kind of not the way it works. Like even though the last thing you do might be consciously doing the positioning, but
Yes.
trust me, you had positioning in your little brain from the beginning, from the very first idea you had. You
100%. Mm.
you but what you had was a thesis, right?
Yes.
So you had a thesis, and the thesis said, so what does positioning define? It defines who's my competitor, what makes me different, what is the value that I can deliver that no one else can, who's a really good fit for this, so what does my best fit customer look like, and ultimately, what is the market that I intend to win? You can't build a product without having some ideas about that floating around in your head. Now, whether you bothered to write them down or
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
if you were just kind of vibing your way through that, but in my mind, if we're doing this properly, we have a thesis, and the thesis said, the founder woke up one day and said, "You know what sucks? Email sucks, and I hate the way Outlook does this, and I'm gonna build better email." So right there, Outlook's the enemy. That's who I'm positioned against. I'm gonna build something better than Outlook. Well, how's it gonna be better? Well, I'm gonna do spam in a completely different way. Okay, that's your differentiated capability. What's the value that it's going to provide? Well, you won't have to deal with all those spam things anymore. So it's going to help you save time, and you're going to have spend more time on the stuff that matters and less time filtering through all this, blah, 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 whatever it is, right? And then you're like, well, who cares a lot about that? Well, people that get a crap pile of email. Well, am I going to sell it to individuals, or am I going to sell it to companies? Like, how do I actually sell this thing? Blah, 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 blah. You had a thesis when you built it, man. But here's the thing, like, my experience with this, because I worked in-house for 25 years before I was a consultant, and I launched lots of things. And my experience with this, we always had a thesis, and then we launched it. And usually our first wave of customers, whether that was a beta or early customer experience, or even if we just launched it and dealt with the first wave of customers, we find out where the thesis is right or wrong. And we never get it 100% right, because markets are weird and customers are weird and people do irrational things. And so then we find out, we thought we were competing with Outlook, let's say, but it turned out the people that really cared about this stuff were more in small businesses, and those people are using Gmail. So we had the wrong competitor. So they're comparing us to Gmail. And we thought our killer feature was going to be X, but it turned out once we see the people using the thing, they actually love this other thing more. And because this other thing is actually our real value, the people that are the best fit customers are a little bit different than what we decided. So now we're going to adjust the positioning to fit what we've got. Now, maybe we don't like what we got, right? Or maybe what happens is we put the thing out and we're just not selling anything, which means there is no real compelling value to a target customer. We're going to have to go back to the drawing board and do what we call a pivot into something else. But at least we've learned something. We had a thesis, we went out, we disproved the thesis, and so now we're going to try a new thesis and do it again. In the work I do, I don't work with pre-launch products. So in my opinion, that phase of figuring out what we want to buy, what we want to build, and does it satisfy a market, and there's a whole bunch of things in there, is a completely different set of it's a really different piece of work. And I don't think one that you would necessarily hire an outside consultant to do. It's kind of the nut of what your business has been constructed to do, is we're trying to find a solution to a problem. So hiring a consultant to go say, figure out my business for you, in my mind, seems like crazy town. So I don't think that would be a good use of a consultant's time. But often what we have is we built the thing. We had this thesis. We maybe didn't come up with it using a process or anything, but we had a thesis, right? We launched it, and the thing is just fire. It's great. We put it out there. There's all kinds of market pull. Everything's going great. And then a competitor shows up, and the competitor catches up with us in certain ways. Not all the ways, but catches up in certain ways. And they're starting to cause us some pain. And we're like, should we reposition so that we make it more obvious how we're different than these guys? Because we never had to compare ourselves to anyone before, but now we got to compare ourselves to these. That is generally when sitting down and doing an actual structured process to go through and tighten up your positioning is a good idea. And so the work that I do as a consultant is generally we're looking at products that are already in market. The market landscape has shifted. The product itself has evolved. The competitors have evolved. The landscape has shifted. We're still out there selling, and most of the companies that come to me are successful. They're out there selling tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue in these things. But what they're finding is that their marketing and salespeople are struggling to very succinctly answer the question, why pick us over the other guys? And so that's what we're working on.
Quickly, if you're enjoying this and you want to get the full thinking blueprint that sits under basically all of these ideas, then you're going to want to grab a copy of my book, No Bullshit Strategy. I'd like to say that you can pick it up wherever you get your books, but let's be real, you're probably just going to go to Amazon, and that is all fine because it is on there too, obviously. Two of my favourite reviews are one where a professor from USC said that she'd made it required reading for all of her students, quite right too, and another where a guy called it a spiritual masterpiece masquerading as a book on strategy. Now, that is obviously the kind of praise I'm here for. So, if you're curious what the hell he was on about, then go and check it out. These are very, very familiar patterns that you're describing, but the one bit of it that isn't really all that familiar, and maybe this is a tech thing, is that you're attributing a huge amount of open-mindedness and humility to the founders and CEOs of these businesses to actually have that moment where they say like, oh, seems like our initial hypothesis was actually wrong in
Mm,
certain ways, or
mm.
to recognize something in the market has changed and we need to shift positioning. Because what I would more commonly see is that, assuming that the business was successful for a period of time, so they had a little bit of credibility under their belt,
Yep.
I would more often see that they're completely wedded to the concept of the business as is, and any poor performance is seen as more of um, an optimization issue. Well, we need to get better salespeople, or well,
That's
we
right.
need oh, we need better marketing, or
Yeah.
and a whole bunch of tweaking, but never ever questioning the core. So, I mean, do you think are
I mean,
people?
obviously, like, that kind of a CEO does not call for help, right? So
No,
I don't
they
talk to
don't.
those people, right? Like,
It's
so
very
it
self-selecting.
they've selected out. So, like, but here's the thing, and here's another thing to think about. Like, not all problems are positioning problems.
Hmm.
Like, you can have the thing doing badly because your marketing team sucks at lead generation, or you can have the thing doing badly because nobody knows you exist. You can have the thing doing badly because your salespeople are terrible. Maybe you can have the thing doing badly because the founder is selling and the founders just ain't not that good at it. Like, you can have products that are great, fantastic, and the positioning's fantastic, but it still fail. Like, great positioning is not just the ticket to, if it was, we just fix the positioning and everything would be easy, right? And then we'd all go drink out of a coconut on the beach. But it's not the way it works. So here's the thing, like, often the people that come to me, I would call them the hard cases. Like, the people that come to me are generally they've tried a bunch of things.
Yeah.
So they've hired a better head of marketing. They've replaced a few people on the sales team. They've tweaked the heck out of a bunch of stuff, and they still see that these things aren't working. Often what I'll get is the founder calls me and says, "You know what? I pitch this thing and I get the deal every time. Every time. But when I look at the way my salespeople pitch it, that's not the way they tell the story. If I look at what's on my homepage, that ain't it. I don't know how to explain to marketing how it's wrong or what's wrong with it, but I just know that ain't it." He says, "When I listen to sales calls, new customers can't figure the thing out. Existing customers are like, pry it out of my cold dead fingers. But the new customer is like, what is it again? And so, wait, you're like Salesforce? No, we're not like Salesforce. Oh, wait, we're like this." So it's that
Yeah.
confusion between what the product actually is and what an outside new prospect perceives it to be. That gap we can close. We can't solve all the problems, right, with positioning. We can't solve, you know, if like, the other day I had a founder call me and he says, "Look, we're doing 20,000,000 revenue and we're kinda stuck at 20,000,000 revenue. We've never really been able to move beyond that as we got happy customers, so totally happy customers. The customers are so happy. We do the thing, the customers are really happy. No churn, everybody loves us. Um, but, we're just not bringing on enough new logos." And I'm like, "So tell me what happens in a first day of sales team, right? So tell me what happens in a first sales call." And he says, "We close them. We get them in, we pitch them. They love it." And I'm like, "Dude, your problem ain't positioning, right? If you close every deal that comes in and that story works, the story works. You know what your problem is? You're just not getting enough coming in the door. Nobody knows who you are. Your marketing sucks." That's not a positioning problem. That's an awareness problem. That's a lead generation problem. Like, there's all kinds of things. Like, This is the thing, like, people will come and they'll say, "Oh, you know, we really need to fix our positioning because of XYZ," and I'm like, "Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Let's walk through the thing. Like, are we sure it's a positioning problem? Because there's lots of things that could go bad in a business."
So would you say that if you had to have a sort of shorthand rule of thumb over is your problem positioning or is it not positioning? Picking up what you said there, would you say that like positive customer response to the pitch essentially is an indicator that positioning is not the issue, or would you frame it differently?
Generally, that's it. Like, if I've got really happy customers already, right? So I know I've got something that can satisfy a customer, right? So they don't just, like, sign on and churn out or whatever. So I get the product's okay, right? At least for some people. And if I go into a first substantive sales call with a prospect, so customers are different, right? They already know about your stuff and they know what you do and whatever. So you can't test new positioning on a customer. They've already been polluted with,
Mm.
what they know that a prospect would never know until they actually cross the line to being a customer. But I got a first substantive sales call with a new prospect. Weak positioning, you hear it in a sales call. Like, and in the sales call, it's customer comes in and the rep is telling a story, and the customer's just like confused. And they're like, "So wait, so what is it again?" And they're like, "Back up to the previous slide. So when you say that, what do you mean? Like, so are you kind of like this?" And they're asking these questions that are sort of like, "I just kind of don't get it." So what it means is like in all the exposure they've had to your stuff previously, your marketing and whatever drove them to actually come in and agree to take this first call, all of that stuff together didn't really nail the question, what the heck is this thing? So there's that. Second one you'll get is in that first substantive sales call, you will hear um, customers doing things like they'll say, "Oh, so you're just like Salesforce." But you're not. You're nothing like Salesforce. You're not even in that business. And so something in your marketing or the way your salesperson is talking about it is leading people to believe that you should be in the CRM bucket, but you are not. This is a positioning problem, like, in a bad one too. The other one you'll hear in a sales call is, again, I've got these happy customers that don't churn and they love stuff, but a new prospect comes in, gets to the end of the pitch and says, "I get it. Yeah, I get it. I get what you are. I get, who you like, who I should compare you to. I just don't see why I would pay that much money for it. Like, can't I just do this in a spreadsheet? Can't I just hire a couple of interns to get this thing done? Can't I just do this with my old accounting package? It's good enough." Like, what really is the value of what you do versus this club together duct tape thing that I'm using right now? That seems to work good enough. Like, why would I go through all the pain of switching to you? Which indicates that they kind of understand what you are and the bucket you should fit in. They just don't really get the value. And so if you hear that in these sales calls, confusion about what it is, comparing you against the wrong competitors, really uncertain about value, that feels like a positioning problem to me, and we can fix that. Because I got happy customers. Again, there's things that the happy customers know that for some reason we are not communicating it well. For some reason, a new prospect, the light just isn't coming on. And you'll often hear that. Like the companies will come and say, takes us 2, 3 calls before the light comes on. And it's like, imagine if the light came on in marketing. Imagine if the light was on before they even got to your salesperson. Wouldn't that be cool?
It
That's
baffles
what we're
me,
trying to
all
fix.
these companies out there who sell products where no one understands it and no one knows what it is, but they actually manage to get these calls in the first place. That's the thing that I've never understood.
Well, so here's the thing. It generally, like, people aren't stupid, right? And these are a lot of times the companies are calling me and they're hundreds of millions of revenue. And so it's not that it was always bad. It went bad.
Hmm.
It went bad, right? So it was clear at the beginning. And then you had a new release and you added some things. And then you had another new release and you added some things. And then AI came along and you wanted to talk about AI. And then another thing came along and then another thing came along. And the next thing you know, you've bolted on a whole bunch of things. and people are coming at it going, "What's it again? What is it? What is it again?" Right? And sometimes it's not even you. The problem is everybody else. You got a competitor bounces into your market, lots of funding. They do a thing that isn't really all that much like you, but they say they do it. They say they do it, and they bounce in and say, "Yeah, us too. We do it too." Now the customers are coming in and saying, "How are you different from that thing? You sound the same." And you're like, "No, we're not the same at all. Hey, we're not the same at all." But the way you can't get away with this simple explanation you used to be able to get away with because there was nobody else in town. Now there's other people in town, and you gotta answer the question, "Well, why would I buy yours versus the other guys? The other guys is half the price because it's VC funded, right? And you've been in the market for ages, and you're like, all of a sudden you got this price pressure." So it's not that people are stupid, right? It's that stuff changes, and what used to be very good positioning suddenly isn't. And then you've got to figure out how to fix it. And often for hot products, like, and I've worked with lots of companies like this where it was a great idea in the first place. It solved a real need in the market. The positioning was obvious. It wasn't hard. They came into the market and it said, "We do this and we fix this problem." And everybody's like, "Finally, amazing. Take my money." Right? But then what happens? It's such a good idea. You're not the only one, right? And so then other people's pile in the market, things start getting crowded. There's other folks happening. The obvious, you've done a couple 100 million worth of revenue. You've cleaned up the obvious people. Now you're stretching into markets the thing was never really intended for. And all of a sudden it ain't so easy. And then, and now you got to fix it. And how did you build in the first place? You built it on vibes, man, because it wasn't that hard. There was all
Hmm.
kinds of market pull. The positioning was obvious. I didn't need to go through a process and go through steps
Mm.
and figure it out. It was obvious. Now I got a thing it's not obvious. Now what do I do? These are the people that end up with me.
These dynamics that you're talking about, like obviously because your clients are in the tech space, it's
Yeah.
very very clear how much of a problem positioning is for tech companies for a lot of these things that you say. A lot of them make products that are not quite non-obvious what they do.
They're hard to
There's
figure
obviously
out.
they're hard to figure
Yeah.
out. They bundle on all these features and they confuse themselves. Competitors move very fast, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, if we were to turn to like a completely different domain, like if you take a box of cereal for sake of argument, like
Yeah.
generally speaking, at least at the beginning, like with something like that, most companies in the world, most non-tech companies in the world, like they don't have such they don't have these specific issues and pressures. Most of the time, what they sell is quite obvious for people to figure out. All right, well, I get what this thing is. I mean, maybe you don't have to think about it much because you're not necessarily working in that domain, but if you were talking about positioning outside of tech, do you see any ways that it is different, any ways that it is more or less important? Do you have any reflections on non-tech
Oh my
positioning?
gosh. Well, it's so different. It's so different, like in so many ways. But let me give you some of the biggies. So here's one of the biggies. We build this thing and maybe AI changes this, but up until now, to build a mature software product costs a lot of money. Like
Mhm.
I gotta, I'm making an investment, I'm doing this thing. And then we continue to build on that product and improve it, right? If we're successful. And and generally the improvements in that product help us to get at a bigger and bigger and bigger audience. And so if you look at so for example, let's take Salesforce, good example. They initially launched at the very, very low end of the space, selling to very, very small SMB clients. Now they sell to everybody. And in fact, they really do a great job selling to the biggest of the big, great big clients. And that has been a whatever it is, 10, 15, 20-year journey to get there. They didn't, and then that's the same product. I mean, they've acquired other things along the way, but the core product's the same product more or less all the way through. If I'm launching cereal, I don't extend it and say so I launched Fruity Pebbles for kids, for kids that don't want to eat healthy cereal and parents that don't care. And I got Fruity Pebbles, right? I don't wake up in the morning and say, "Okay, I'm gonna now extend Fruity Pebbles into the part of the market that wants healthy cereal or the part of the market that's for grown-ups or whatever that is. Like, I just launched a new product. It's probably based on the same stuff, man, coming from the same factory, using the same, slightly different ingredients. But I take what I've learned there and I launch a completely different product with a completely different brand or whatever. I don't have to like reposition this thing. I don't have some vision of where it's going to be in 10 years and how this thing is going to be. So we don't have that. Um, Here's the other thing we don't have. Like from a buying perspective, uh, I'm you know, the controller at a Fortune 500 company, and I want to buy an accounting system, and the minimum clip for that is going to be $500,000, probably going to be a couple $1,000,000 all in by the time I do it. Like, one, there's a big team of people involved in approving that purchase. I don't get to just wake up in the morning and just pick something like it. Like, IT's gotta be good with it, security's gotta be good with it, the lawyer's gotta be good with it, purchasing's gotta be good with it, end users are gonna have a look at it, and they gotta be like, and I gotta take it to my boss, and if I make a mistake, oh, bad things are gonna happen, man. Like, bad things I'm probably gonna get fired. We fail the audit, that maybe the company goes out of business. Like, it's not good. So this is what we call a highly considered purchase. It probably takes me a year to get that deal done because it's a multi-million dollar year and the stake deal, and the stakes are high. Now, Fruity Pebbles, on the other hand, this is the kind of thing you walk into the grocery store and your kid says, "I want the Fruity Pebbles." You go, "All right, kid, today's your lucky day. You're getting them." And you know what? Like, there's no stakes there. There's no stakes. If I'm walking to the convenience store and I want gum, I just like, first of all, I just look at my options there. I don't go research it before I go to the store. I don't make a short list. I don't like weigh the pros and cons. I don't take it to a buying team and discuss what everybody's requirements are, whatever. I just buy the one in front of me, and the worst that happens is I go, I didn't like that one. I probably won't pick that one again. No stakes, right? B2B enterprise software, there are stakes. Stakes. And so this makes everything different. Like, so first I got to find you, then I got to put you on a short list, then you got to survive being on the short list. Then you gotta survive the opinions of all these other people on the deal team that are dying to get you off that list. And it is just fundamentally a different thing than what we call an unconsidered purchase, which is walk into the grocery store and buy cereal or walk into the convenience store or buy a soda. It's a completely different process with a completely different things impacting the purchase. So I think these are things are really different. Here's the other thing. If B2B enterprise software, if I take that, is what I work with. Because there are so many people involved, and this is such a high risk decision, um, the way you think about value is very different. So I got to go to my boss and justify this thing. And in order to justify this purchase, I got to explain how it's going to help us make money or save money or reduce some kind of risk. And I'm doing that in this fraught environment where I really don't want to lose my job. So I want to make sure that I'm making the right choice. Often, the best possible choice for that person, what we call the champion of a deal, is to not buy anything. Is to go to the boss and say, "You know what, man? Now's not a good time. I looked at all the things. They all kinda look the same. It's risky. We're in the middle of an audit. We probably shouldn't be switching vendors right now. The thing we got right now is okay. It's not perfect, but it's okay." And I just extract myself from that because the risk of picking something and screwing up is so high that it's the easiest thing for me to do for my career is to walk in and convince the boss that we shouldn't do it right now, and then the next time the boss is looking to point their finger at somebody to go make that decision, I hide under the desk. This is not the same as consumer stuff, right? I'm out. I need a pair of shoes. I'm going to a wedding. Gotta buy the stupid shoes. I look at what I got and I buy them. And maybe I got uncomfortable feet for the whole wedding and I regret my choices. It's
I mean,
different. It's
Yeah, the
different. Enterprise B2B software, we lose half our deals to no decision because it's so much easier
oh, that's
to just
interesting.
walk in
Wow,
and say,
that
"Nope,
does, yeah,
nope,
that does ring
we're not
true.
doing nothing." And if you talk to big companies, like, depending on the size of the deals and depending on the market, it's between 40 to 60%. But I can tell you, I worked at a company where we did very, very enormous deals, like, all our deals were multi-million dollar deals, and we lost 70% of our deals to no decision. So we're in a purchase process. They'd made a short list. They were halfway through. They were looking at stuff, and then they just threw up their hands and said, "I don't know, man. Sounds risky."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We don't get that when we're selling bubble gum. I don't think we walk into the store and go, "I don't know, man. I don't know." You just buy one. There's no stakes. Cost you a buck.
For each company in each different industry, and obviously, like, those are two extremes, but there's a whole bunch of other, like, types of business in between. In all cases, fundamentally, the levers to pull to make it work are very, very different, and so it is hard to map across. Every company, to an extent, is going to do positioning, but you can see, and
Oh,
should
yeah.
should do and does positioning, but you can see how the stakes of the positioning are much, much higher, because, like, again, with your bubblegum thing, positioning's one piece of the pie, but a much bigger piece of the pie is, for example, distribution through the retailers or whatever it
That's
might
right.
be, which is coming from somewhere
Exactly.
completely different. So, like, I
Exactly.
guess looping all the way back to the sort of our initial kind of the initial question of, like, the position of positioning within strategy. This is one of the things. Sometimes the key strategic lever is going to be positioning, and other times the positioning is a not it is within that particular business a non-issue, and the issue is something
Yeah.
completely different.
I mean, this is it. Like, and it's the place where I operate, like, in the kind of companies I work with, the positioning is so critical. Like,
Mhm.
it's so critical. We're gonna die if it's bad. Because if the positioning's bad, we don't get on the short list. If the positioning's bad, we don't make it fast past the first call. Like, we're dead in the water. We don't even get a chance to get started on these deals that are gonna take 6 months to close or a year to close, right? Whereas, again, like, and here's the other thing, like, value, when we talk about value in B2B, we're helping you make money, we're helping you save money, we're helping you reduce risk, right? Consumer products, the value comes in all kinds of flavors, right? I
Mhm.
really like
Yeah, it's
I
much more
my
subtle,
value.
yeah.
Yeah, well, the value can be anything. It can be like, this is gonna get you a date. This is gonna make you look rich, you know? This is gonna whatever, this is just gonna make you feel good, This is gonna like, there's so many levers you could pull there, and making the decision on which lever you wanna pull is pretty important, but you can pull on a lot of levers. You can pull on a lot of levers. Whereas enterprise B2B tech, like, we just don't have as many levers to pull. And it doesn't mean that our decisions are rational. They're often quite highly irrational because there's so much fear involved. But but at the same time, we don't have this spectrum of value that we do over on the consumer side. Because again, it's just you. It's often just you and your personal preference. And that's where we get looking at things like if you're buying a house, well, buying a house is a lot more like buying enterprise software than it is buying bubblegum, right? Even though it's a consumer purchase, right? Like, you're not buying the first one you look at. You're doing your homework. There's other people involved. Your spouse has gotta be cool with it, or whatever, whoever else is gonna be living with you. Like, so there's big ticket things we do in consumer actually look a lot like B2B. So line is actually not so much consumer versus not consumer. I like to think of it more as, like, considered, like,
Mhm.
how considered is the purchase versus how unconsidered is the purchase.
Yeah, yeah, excellent point. Yeah, and it does on the subject of, these, well, how how companies gonna die. I enjoyed your newsletter today about positioning in the age of AI, and it chimed a lot with stuff that I've been writing about recently, where my flavor, I think, of the similar point is that, I believe that we've entered in the last 18 months or so, a completely new era of competition. I'm sort of referring to it as the age of hyper competition, where I think the abundance of supply, not just in tech, but in all sorts of industries, the abundance of supply, the speed of iteration, and basically fundamentally the competitive pressure has ramped up to a degree that people haven't ever seen before, and people haven't quite cottoned onto yet. And mostly we're only seeing the effects of this in people's kind of anxiety, franticness, people just not kind of having a lot of fun out there in the world of business writ large at the moment, I think. And I thought that and I thought that, your points as it pertained to positioning in tech were very aligned with this, and you made some really good observations about how companies need to sort of change the way they think about positioning in this new, not that you use the term hyper competitive, but in this hyper competitive era. So, are there any of those that really loom large in your mind that you'd like to pick out and comment on?
Well, there's a handful of things. Like, one thing I will say, the concept of positioning, um, was first introduced in the late '70s, early '80s by these guys, Rees and Trout. And, if you read the Rees and Trout book, you would laugh because, the beginning of it talks about how in the '20s and the '30s and, up until the '40s or so, we didn't have choice in consumer products. Like,
Right.
you went out and you bought there was one vacuum cleaner, and you just went
Yeah.
out and bought the vacuum cleaner, and that was it. You didn't have choice in products. And then we entered into this hyper competitive space where all of a sudden there was 5 vacuum cleaners. And oh my god, which one are you gonna pick? And they talked about how we moved into an era where you could sell purely on brand because all the vacuum cleaners were the same, more or less, right? So you could and so this is the Mad Men era, right?
Yep.
We threw a ton of money at advertising. You could sell the most vacuum cleaners if you were the one that people knew. You could, hire a famous movie star to be in your ad and say, "I'm gonna buy this one because that person said it was good," or whatever. And then, according to Reason Trout, we moved to a point where, one, the consumers got a bit jaded with that, and two, the products became more and more sophisticated. And because they became more sophisticated, there were actual differences between what the products could do and the value they could deliver. And, you'd want this kind of product for this kind of job, but, there was different kinds of vacuum cleaners for different kinds of jobs, and they're not all the same. And, you actually had to do some research and figure out which was the right one for you. At the same time, consumers got very jaded. Suppliers were lying about things and just, saying their brand was the best and it wasn't the best, or they were saying their brand was whatever and it didn't actually do that thing. And so so we got overwhelmed with advertising. We got trained that vendors lie. And then we got these products that are actually substantially different. And so what do we need to do? We need to actually position. And so, so these guys came up with this concept of positioning, whatever, whatever, whatever. But that movement, like if you think about that era of going through, there was only ever one ironing board, and now there's 29 iron boards and I got to pick between them. Like that has never stopped happening. That has never stopped happening. So now what we have, um, we have potentially the great proliferation of products. I'm not so sure we're gonna see that, but what we are gonna see, because I just think that, there's a lot of things that aren't gonna survive, like every other big change in technology we've had. But what we are seeing is a big upheaval in the status quo, which I think is very healthy for mature markets. And in tech, in a lot of ways, we're in mature markets now. If we look
Hmm.
at things
Yeah.
like, but particularly in enterprise tech, there's lots of stuff that's been around for 20 years and it doesn't look all that different than it looked 20 years ago. And the gains we've made in the last 20 years just aren't that great. It's time for a big shakeup. How it gets shook up, who knows? And so what we're going to have is winners and losers. And there's going to be companies that 5 years ago we thought of as hot, that were big, hot, growth, high growth companies, are going to become legacy limpers. And there's going to be a new patch of high growth hot companies that can do a lot of things that we couldn't do before. And so if you're a product that's fairly established and you're in market right now, how do you make sure you come out of this being the hotness and not the legacy limper? That's the fight that everybody's fighting right now. And, the other thing too is, if you're coming out your AI native things and working with lots of those companies too, there's so many, like the competition is so hot, like we get in any new emerging market space. Um, a hot new thing has been unlocked that we could do. So there are 1,001 companies piling in there, but tons of them are not going to survive. And so if you're AI native company, how are you carving out your spot where you're going to be the king to survive the big shakeout, which is inevitably coming? And so these two things, these are fundamentally positioning problems. And so we are in the middle of kind of a lot of companies going through what I would call a positioning crisis.
It's a good time for positioning because going back to the thing you said before about how there are some of these companies who, that first out of the box hypothesis they had, it was so obvious, like,
Yeah.
here's the product, it fixes this problem, people want it, da da da. Like, it's like round peg into a round hole. And there was a time, I mean, if we just talk about tech, there was a time not so long ago when there was lots of low hanging fruit like that, and there was lots of fairly easy businesses to be made if someone just noticed it and then executed it well. And over time, these slam dunk opportunities, presumably this is what you've observed over the years. These slam dunk opportunities, there aren't an unlimited volume of them, and they get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Then what you see is people endlessly encouraging companies to niche and niche and niche. And when I hear people talking about niching, to me, that just sounds, it's sort of code for a desperate response to, like, a lot of the way people think about it is just take less and less and less desirable market positions because everything else is taken. So it's a bit of a kind of a, a race to smallness in a sense. And
Oh,
now
I don't believe in that at all.
I'll
I
get,
don't believe in
well,
that. I would
yeah,
strenuously
go on.
disagree with that. 'Cause so for example, like, the so for example, let's take the CRM market because I know a lot about
Hmm.
that market. Like, undisputed king of CRM right now is Salesforce.
Hmm.
I I could name you a dozen very big companies in the CRM space that niched into a thing that said, "We're just gonna do financial services because they don't do it all that well. We're just gonna do quick serve restaurants because they don't actually have a product that serves that very well. We're just gonna do retail because, to be honest, Salesforce doesn't have much of a footprint in retail because the way you wanna do relationship management in retail is actually really different." And there are like, that idea of customer relationship management is so big that there is room for dozens of billion-dollar companies in that space.
No,
And
I completely agree, but you
and so
can't
niching in
keep
that
on
space
slicing the
is
pie
not a race to
forever.
smallness at all. In fact, I would say it's a race to bigness. Like, the only way you're gonna survive against the big multipurpose vendor is to pick a spot that's underserved.
I completely agree, but if you extrapolate that out, so if we just take that CRM example, so we start with one big blobbish CRM, then we go
Mm.
down to the retail, financial services, da da da, and then the next layer you go down to whatever the next cut is. Now you can go, as you say, it's such a big industry, you can go pretty deep and still have amazing opportunities. You can't go deep forever, though. Eventually companies are squeezing themselves into narrower and narrower
Well, I
opportunities. Of
mean,
course,
but
there.
that's just I mean, that's like, by definition, your addressable market needs to be big enough to meet the needs of the business,
Right.
right? So if you're, this comes up once in a while, not very often, but if I roll it back about 4 or 5 years ago, I worked with a company and they were pretty small, like 10 million revenue. And we we worked through what did they have that was really differentiating and what was the value they could provide. And then who cares a lot about that value, right? So let's put a boundary around that. Like, what does a best fit customer look like? And when you lean back on that, that wasn't a very big slice of a pie. And so, we leaned back at it and said, well, is there enough there to make your number this year? Yeah. Is it a big enough market you can make your number next year? Maybe. Big enough market to make the number that you want to make in year 3? No. So what's the problem? But we don't we're going to have to go back to the drawing board on the product side and build something that meets the needs of a bigger market.
So my simple question then is, in the last 5 years of you doing this and observing just like what's happening, have you not seen, as you work with these companies, each time the positioning challenge becoming progressively tighter as each year goes and the
No.
proliferation and development of options expands?
Not really. Like, it
Interesting.
generally I don't think I've seen that. Like, the companies I've seen, it's generally the opposite, right? Like, they've dominated the niche that they're in,
Mhm.
and now their challenge is to push the boundaries of the niche bigger. So, they've started out in the mid-market, they're absolutely dominating the mid-market, now they got a choice. They can either go up or they can go down. And so they're looking at, well, what do we have to build in order to go up? Because the
Mhm.
competition is different when we go up. Or what would we build in order to go down? And what would the mechanics of that look like? What would the pricing model and distribution model look like? Because that would be different if we went down. So I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of that. What I've seen a lot of is the company made all their money here, but there is market pull somewhere else.
Mhm.
And so the question is, do we wanna chase that market or not? And if we were to chase that market, is there gold over there? Or, are we just dealing with a handful of outlier companies that are attempting to pull us in that direction? But the companies pulling us over there are weirdos, and the vast majority of the market we wouldn't win because we're over there because we simply do not have enough value to beat whoever the incumbent is over in that other thing. So I see a lot of that. Um, I don't see so much of a company that's, in a market doing well, being besieged on sides and saying, okay, we're going to go smaller. Um,
Well, no.
well,
Yeah, I mean,
I don't see
that would not
that,
be great.
right? I don't see
Mm.
that where they're saying, okay, we're going to stop doing this and stop doing that. I've seen it. I've seen lots of companies where I come in, you work through the whole positioning thing. They're focused on 4 different verticals, and then when you get right down to it, you're like, "You know what? The only one where you really should be winning is this one. What would happen if you put all your effort into that one?" So I did one where the company was trying to serve a whole bunch of stuff, and we got really tight on the value. They were a small company at the time, like 10,000,000 revenue or so. And we got really tight on the value, and then we got looking at who's a really good fit for that value, and they were selling to all kinds of slice of life customers, but where we landed was the financial services customers were actually the best, and even more specifically, we had this conversation where we said, "Well, financial services is still quite a big market." They're only 10,000,000 revenue, so, I mean, financial services may be too big.
Mm.
And so it's like, okay, well, and then we went down, we made this big list of customers, and it was clear that they were having a lot of success with credit unions in the United States. And so the question was, well, if you just focused on credit unions, again, is that big enough to make the number this year? And the answer was, oh, yeah, more than big enough. Okay, is
Mm.
it big enough to make the number yet next year? Oh, yeah, maybe even year 3. It's like, okay, well, so we could bite that one off and think of how much easier your marketing would be, your go-to-market would be, your sales pitch would be really tailored. You probably just clean up there. And then when you've exhausted that, now we're gonna look at where do we go beyond credit unions, and we had a short list of places that you could go that would be next to that. So that was, pre-COVID, 2019 that I worked with that company. They doubled down on credit unions, and they're now over 100 million revenue, and they've never left credit unions. They're still just doing credit unions. In fact, they're the absolute undisputed king of credit unions. And so often what I'm seeing is the opposite. The company is attempting to go so broad that they just can't get any traction anywhere. And they'd be better to say, okay, we're not going to niche down forever, but we're going to niche down so that we can concentrate our scarce resources to a fine point and just go win this market. And then again, bowling pin strategy. Once I get
Yeah.
that one, then I can go bigger, then I can go bigger, then I can go bigger. And as I get bigger and bigger, I'm a stronger company. I'm a more resilient company. I've got the things to do that. I see almost none of the opposite happening where the company says, oh no, we're in trouble. Let's just do
Oh,
this.
no. Yeah. Yeah,
Don't
certainly
see
not
that.
from that starting position of strength.
Yeah.
Listen, we are we're at time. Will you permit me one last unpositioning related question, if I
Sure,
may?
sure. Let's hear it. Yeah,
So,
sure.
ignoring all the shop talk, like I said at the outset, like in your own domain, in your own industry of solo business consultants, like I said at the outset, you are one of the best. You're one of the kingpins. So I was curious
Oh,
if
thank
you look
you.
back on your career.
I don't know if that's
Um,
true, but thanks for thinking it.
it seems true to me. Seems true to
The
me.
people I
Uh,
think that are doing a really good job solo consulting, like, you don't even know who these people are. You
I'm
you
well
bump into
aware of
them,
that. There are
you
some
bump
people
into
out
them,
there.
you bump into them, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, teach me
Uh,
your secrets."
yes, and that's how I feel
Because
about you.
they
So
run off word of mouth because their expertise is so amazing, right? And they're just sort of like, "Hey, I know a guy that does a thing,"
yeah, they're not
like
all like super famous, are they? But in your case, if you look back on your career and you think about like where the breakthrough moment was for you personally, what was it, and what was the outlier decision that you made, thing that you did, where you look back on it and it was like, wow, it was doing that thing that was a real turning point. Can you pinpoint something?
I don't know, like, probably a couple of things. Like, so one was I never wanted to be a consultant, right? I wanted to be in-house running a team of marketers. That was always the goal. For a while the goal was to work at really big companies, and then I did that, and then the goal became to go back to small ones and work at ones that were cool. But, but I I never really wanted to be a consultant, and I had dipped my toe into consulting, but not seriously at various points when, the company would get acquired, I'd leave because I didn't wanna stick around with a big company, and then I'd be looking for the next thing, and I couldn't make up my mind, and so I would consult for 2 or 3 companies simultaneously, and then inevitably fall in love with one, go work for them, and then go back in-house. And so that was my dipping a toe into consulting for a few years. Um, and then the last job I had was shit, basically. And I quit slash got fired. And I needed that experience to really slam the door on in-house work. And so that experience was so bad that I came out and said, "You know what, April? We're not doing that again. This is it." Slam the door. So that was the first thing. I don't think I would have had the guts to stick it because early in a consulting business, like the first couple of years of consulting business, you don't make amazing money. You don't really know what you're doing. You're trying to figure everything
Mm.
out. And so it would have been much easier for me to stay in-house because I was already well established in-house. I was making good money. People knew who I was. Like, not hard for me to go get a job. Um, and so I needed a real sort of like, nope, we're not doing that. Burn the boats. I needed that in order to go do consulting. And then I always knew positioning was my thing because it was when I was in-house. But at the beginning, I was really not sure about how to do that as an outside consultant. And it took me a while to figure that out. And I think the biggest shift in my thinking where I really unlocked this, I think, was um, when you work in house, you're used to being the person that does things, right? Like you give me a thing and I'm working on a thing and I execute it and I own all the stages of it and I own the ultimate output of it and all that stuff. And if that was what the work was, then that is not good work to send to a consultant, in my opinion, because you should hire a person internally to do that if that's the way the work is. And my big unlock was that for positioning work to really work, the team has to own it. Like, so they have to feel ownership of what it is that we're building, and they have to feel ownership of the execution of it and the ultimate outputs of it. And so at the beginning, I was trying to do positioning for people with mixed results. And most of the time when it didn't stick is because the team just simply didn't believe. Like, they were like, "Yeah, that's your opinion on what the positioning should be. We have other opinions, and our opinions don't necessarily align with yours," or whatever. Or there was somebody on the team was skeptical and never really came across. And so I switched to seeing myself as more of a teacher and a guide.
Mhm.
Like, I am gonna guide you through a process. I'm gonna teach you how to think about positioning. I'm gonna teach you how to move through the steps. But it ain't my positioning, people. It's your positioning, because you know the most about this market, these buyers, this problem you're trying to solve, your product. No outside person would ever have the depth on that you folks do. And so I'm there to guide you through a process to get the best possible positioning for you, made by you. And you are going to own that positioning because it's yours, it's not mine. And you are going to own the execution on that positioning, again, because it's yours and it's not mine. It's your job as the head of marketing to figure out how to turn that into marketing stuff. It's your job as the head of sales enablement to figure out how we're going to help sales be enabled on all this stuff. It's your job as a company to figure out how to get awareness around this and how to make this thing sing in the market. And so that was a big unlock for me. And all the projects I did after that worked much, 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 much better. We got much better positioning when I kept my ego and my stuff out of it. We got much better positioning. There's way better ownership among the team, way, way better execution of the positioning after I was in there once I took myself out of it. And I think that, now having done lots and lots of that, I see a lot of companies attempting to just kinda outsource positioning, like, the CEO will be like, "This is just some stupid marketing thing. Can't I just hire some little marketing person to come in and, like, do the positioning for me and then do all the messaging and then just have that work?" And it never, ever, ever works out good. And so, anyway, so for me, and again, the big caveats on that are it's B2B, it's enterprise, you have a sales team, like, you're in market with a reasonable amount of traction. Like, all of this would not be true if those 4 things weren't true. Like, if you were pre-release product, you'd do things differently. If you were a little wee company that didn't have significant traction, you would do things differently. If you weren't B2B, it would be different. If you didn't have a sales team, it would be different. And so I'm talking about inside my little circle. That was kind of the big unlock for me. Like, I was used to being a doer, and I had to stop being a doer and switch into teacher, coach, guide. I'm here to help you, but I'm not here to do it for you, man. Because you're gonna have to own everything that comes after this.
Well, I mean, I can relate to that a lot. I think the more broad thing that I think is more universally applicable beyond those specific parameters as well is that, I mean, in general, I have found from my own experience, you naturally think if I go and do something for a client, that's really appealing for them because they just shove it off on you and you say, here's the solution, all wrapped up in a bow, good to go. And you just think to yourself, that must be the most helpful way that I can do this. And in practice, it just rarely works out that way. Like it's my theory on it, aside from all the things that you've said, is that it actually also takes most clients don't have enough humility, I find, to actually dump a responsibility which they might think is fundamentally their responsibility onto someone else. Because you're basically saying,
Well,
"Hey,
it is.
listen,
Yeah.
April, I'm too stupid to do this. Can you do this?" And no one's going to, very few people are going to say that. Whereas if you're guiding them, they still can
Yeah,
tell themselves that they're in control. They're the smart one. Yes, April's bringing another perspective. That's great. But all the egos remain in
yeah,
place, which is pretty helpful.
yeah. You'd be surprised though at how many people come to me and they're like, "We just don't wanna think about it, April. Just do it for us."
And you don't do that from time to time?
No, no.
No.
Nope, learn those lessons early. That's just a disqualifier for me, right?
Awesome.
It's a disqualifier because what it actually means when a company says that is they don't really understand what positioning is. If they did, the CEO would be like, "You are taking that away from me,
Yeah.
like, out of my cold, dead fingers," right? Like, I if you really understood how much this thing was gonna impact every aspect of the business, like, there's no way that work would be happening without the CEO in the room. And so the people that think it's just a little marketing thing, the little marketing
Yep.
department's gonna do their
Yep.
little marketing thing, they think it's messaging. They think we're just doing messaging. They don't think it's gonna change which customers we're gonna focus on. They don't think it's gonna change how we actually show up in the market. They don't think it's gonna change the way we tell the story or point of view on the market or any of that stuff. They think it's just gonna change the tagline or something. I don't know
Yep.
what, but and so this is generally a disqualifier for me. And so if I can't get them around to the idea that, what we're actually doing is defining how you show up in the market, then they're disqualified. Like what they want is like if they'd be happy with someone just fixing the words on the page, just hire a copywriter, man. Get that done. Like you don't need to come work with me on that.
Yes. Well, amen to that. And thank you. Thank you so much for coming on here with me today. I've loved
Sure.
listening to you and learning from you. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to catch up again sometime.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot for listening. If you want to keep expanding the way that you think and the results that you get, then make sure you hit subscribe here. And also check out basicarts.org/raremind, where you can subscribe to my Substack, which features deep essays on these topics, deep practical essays, and fundamentally is all about how businesses can win in this crazy post-AI